So, last Sunday, do you remember last Sunday we had a question? Do you remember the question? It was a perfect LifePoint church question. It was honest, it was transparent, it was raw. The question went something like this. Okay, in the Bible, Jesus said, "Ask and you shall receive. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened to you." Well, here's my issue. I've been asking and not getting. I've been seeking, not finding. And the more I knock, the more the door gets slammed in my face. What is this all about? So this question essentially raises the issue of whether or not there is, how can I put it delicately, false advertising in the teachings of Jesus. Now, we're all used, I think, to false advertising. We all understand that on occasion an overzealous marketing team will say things that are slightly untrue. For example, in 2009, with the help of Kim Kardashian, Skechers shoes launched their revolutionary Shape-Up shoe. The sales pitch was that this new sole technology would alleviate the need for physical exercise. Apparently, the design of this shoe would allow wearers even, to burn additional calories simply by going about their daily activities. Just by wearing these shoes, customers were told, your muscles would become more toned, your tummy would become less flabby. Sound too good to be true? The Sports and Health Department at the University of Wisconsin certainly thought so. Having examined them, they discovered no evidence whatsoever to suggest that wearing these shoes would help a person exercise more intensely, or burn more calories, or improve muscle tone. Another classic oversell was Nivea My Silhouette. Those of you who bought this product, I suspect many of you, will remember that it was a body cream that promised to make you thinner. Okay? Touching a raw nerve here, I think. This is a great sales pitch. Most people are interested in being thinner, I expect most people here anyway. And this is a product that makes you thinner from the outside. So this is good news. You don't need to go to the gym. You don't need to sign up for Weight Watchers. Just rub this cream on your body and you'll lose weight. And you can choose which parts of the body you want to lose weight on. One particular television advert for this product showed a woman in her bedroom getting dressed just after having applied this cream to her tummy and thighs. And to her delight, she discovers that she's now able to squeeze into a pair of jeans that for many a month had been inaccessible to her. Top marks for advertising, not so much for truth. My favorite piece of false advertising, however, comes from the 19th century. This is a bottle of Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound. This was a remedy marketed exclusively at women. The sales pitch was that this product would help women get through the domestic rigors of the Victorian day. You know how hard it is, ladies, to be a woman. Sometimes it's just tough to make it to the end of the day. But the good news is, or was, that if you just take regular 2-hourly doses of this vegetable compound, it'll take the edge off and you'll feel better. Turns out, however, that Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound had very little vegetables in it. In fact, it had very little of anything in it, except alcohol. so all over North America, women in their tens of thousands found that if they took the recommended 2-hourly dosage of this product, they felt pretty good. Needless to say, this product was wildly popular, especially among members of the temperance movement. Seriously. And it made Miss Pinkham millions. And at a first reading of the Christian Gospels, this is how it appears to be with Jesus. When the Bible says that God loves us, and that God is with us, and that He will never forsake us, it sounds so good. It feels so very comforting. But the realities of life raise questions about the veracity of those claims. And as I go through this morning's story in Mark's Gospel, I'm going to suggest that sometimes the questions are more valuable than the answers. Because you see, when you have all the answers, when your life raises no issues and throws up no questions, you're not learning anything, because you don't have to. However, when life takes you to a place of difficulty that throws up all sorts of questions and issues, in that place you learn. You learn who you are, and you discover something of the value of the faith to which you hold. So in this morning's scripture, we're going to look at the first of 4 successive episodes in which Jesus, either by his action or inaction, deliberately causes his followers to raise questions. And those questions essentially become stepping stones for them that take them a little bit further on in the faith which they've recently discovered. So let's set the scene for this morning's story with a little bit of George Clooney for the ladies. So, this morning's Bible story begins with Jesus on a boat in the Sea of Galilee. Now, for those of you who enjoy watching the Weather Channel, you'll enjoy a little bit of this. The Sea of Galilee is down at the bottom. It's about 700 or so feet below sea level. And about 30 miles away from it is a hill called Mount Hermon, about 10,000 feet or so above sea level. So what happens is cold air descends from Mount Hermon. Cold air always goes down, and it meets warm air ascending from the Sea of Galilee. Warm air goes up, and when cold air meets warm air, you get a violent weather system. We spared every expense in the making of these graphics. And when very cold air meets very warm air, you get a very violent weather system. That's why hurricanes form in the Gulf of Mexico during the summer, right? Because cold air from the Atlantic meets warm air from the Gulf. Anyway, so in verse 37 of Mark chapter 4, Mark says that a furious squall came up. So what we're talking about here are big waves, big winds, lots of puking over the side of the boat. And I spell that out for you in case you're dyslexic and you think this sentence says a furious squall, in which case you'd have a mental image of an angry Indian woman with a tomahawk chasing after Jesus. Okay. Then we're told that the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Now these words were written by Mark. Mark wasn't there. According to tradition, Mark got the information for his biography from St. Peter. And St. Peter, as I'm sure you know, was a fisherman. And fishermen spend their entire working lives on water and tend not to panic when water gets a little bit rough. I spent the first 5 years of my career in a fishing village in the northeast of Scotland, and these sorts of men tend to be men of steel. They don't panic when the weather gets rough. So if you're ever on a boat with one of these people and they start to panic, that's a cue that you can start to panic as well. Fishermen know 2 things very well. They know the weather and they know boats. These men, in verse 37, know that the weather in verse 37 is too much for the boat in verse 37, therefore they're going to die. Jesus, meanwhile, is in the stern, that's the back of the boat, sleeping on a cushion, because Jesus was cool like that. The disciples woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" So here's the question. This is the moment in which the disciples realize that maybe they've bought into a product that isn't quite able to deliver what was promised. I mean, when you get into the whole God-Jesus faith thing, as a bare minimum, you assume that Jesus cares. He cares about you. He cares about the stuff you're going through. That's the warm fuzzy of faith, right? God is nice and God likes me. And for these disciples in the boat, that fuzzy feeling wasn't a feeling, it was tangible. They'd been with Jesus for months. They'd been traveling with him for months. And in the story so far, they've seen Jesus pulling some pretty amazing rabbits out of some pretty desperate-looking hats. And now they themselves are in a desperate situation, and they're like, "Jesus, it's rabbit time. I've seen that you care. Well, now I need you to care about me. I've seen the miracles, and now I need one. I've heard that you love me. Well, now I need you to show me that love. I've heard that you're nice and that you like me. Well, now I need to see that. I need to feel that." And yet, in this perfect storm, as the reality of their trouble crashes up against the inactivity of Jesus, they get the impression that Jesus just doesn't care. And I detect a fair bit of sarcasm in this sentence. "Jesus, we're dying here. We're desperate here. And your eyes are shut. Don't you see what we're going through?" This is the honest question of life and faith. Sometimes life puts us through stuff that questions the faith we have. And if we are truly honest, we will say, "God, don't you care? Don't you see? Are you blind? Are you deaf?" And so as Mark writes this story down, I think he's almost certainly thinking to himself, this would be a great story for my church. His church, you'll remember, is located in the city of Rome in the late 60s, early 70s of the first century, in a period of history when Mark's friends are being arrested and killed as spectacles in the Roman amphitheaters. He's writing these words to people who've almost certainly said in their prayers, "God, are you deaf? Don't you see? Don't you care? Where are you? I'm asking but not getting. I'm seeking but not finding. I'm knocking but the door of help keeps getting slammed shut in my face." And this is a question, I think, that's not typically asked in church, because in church we like to give you the impression that life and faith can all be taught in simple, neat, easy to understand packages. And so when we come to church with our depression and with our anxiety and with our regret and with our loneliness and all the difficulties of life, we feel that our complicated story just doesn't fit in to the neat, simplistic truth that we get told on a Sunday. And so we then feel the pressure to pretend. To pretend that our life is something other than what we actually know it to be. The need to pretend that you are happier and holier and far more together than you actually are. The need to keep the face on. And so please remember, please, that this church is not a place where you need to pretend. Okay? We know full well that life and faith don't come in simple, neat, easy to understand packages. And for the church to suggest otherwise is for the church to be disingenuous both to life and to the teachings of the Bible. The people who wrote the Bible were laced with transparency. For example, have a look at this. This comes from one of the songbooks in the Bible, the book of Psalms. This is something that people would have sung in church. And it says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from the words of my groaning? O my God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. I seek and do not find. I knock and the door doesn't get open to me. Don't you know what I'm going through? Don't you feel my pain? Don't you understand my struggles? Let's have a look at one more of these. This song was sung in the temple in Jerusalem. And this is the opening line of the song. How's this for a way to begin a worship time together? Why have you rejected us forever, O God? So there's none of the nonsense here about I step in the door of church and I pretend my problems don't exist and I pretend everything's perfect and I have this fake smile on my face and isn't Jesus wonderful and doesn't Jesus make everything work and all my problems go away? No, there's none of that. It's, hey, let's express this feeling we have that God has abandoned us, that God has rejected us. I'm seeking but not finding. I'm asking but not getting. And I could go on and on like this, reading you line after line in the Bible that reflects real life as it is actually lived by real people. And those real life situations in the Bible become the stimuli for real questions. And if you never ask real questions, you never get real answers. At this point in the story, the disciples have been with Jesus for months. They've eaten with him, slept with him, laughed with him, socialized with him. They've heard his teaching, seen some of the things he's been doing. But they've never had occasion to discover whether or not he actually cares. But now they do. And this is the nature of difficulty. It takes you to a place of questions, where you learn things about yourself and about faith that you did not previously know. So in response to their question, Jesus gets up in verse 39, and Mark says that he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Now this is interesting because the phrase rebuked and the phrase quiet, be still actually come from the lexicon of first century exorcism. And elsewhere in the story, Jesus uses these exact phrases in those sorts of circumstances. And I say that because in this story, the protagonists are largely superstitious. They believed that the water was a place of evil, a place of monsters and ghosts and demons, in much the same way that in medieval Europe, people believed that the forest was a place of danger. You perhaps remember Grimm's fairy tales are essentially all about don't go into the forest because monsters live there and witches and all that stuff. So all around the Sea of Galilee, people were brought up to believe about these legends and myths that out there in the water is where bad things happen. So I'm not going to get into the issue of whether or not bad things happen because of evil. I think the answer to that question is sometimes and sometimes not. Anyway, what's going on here in the story is that Jesus speaks to the water, which people believed was evil, and he performs an exorcism on it, after which we're told the wind dies down and it gets completely calm. So the question has been, Jesus, do you care? Jesus could now have answered that question very directly. He could have said, guys, of course I care. I just didn't know what you were going through. I was in the back of the boat with my Dr. Dre's on, listening to some music, and I didn't know you were suffering. I didn't know you were in trouble. Why didn't you just wake me up earlier? Because now, see, I care. The wind is gone. The waves are gone. Everything's fine. I love you guys. Come on. Next time, just wake me up. Everything will be fine. He doesn't do this. Jesus is a Jewish teacher. And Jewish teachers usually respond to questions with questions. And they do this because they want their students to internalize some of the things that they say they believe. So in verse 40, Jesus does this. The question has been, Jesus, do you care? The answer is, why are you afraid? Do you have no faith? Why are you afraid? Why are you worried? Why do you lie awake at night? Why is your experience of today so spoiled by your thoughts about what might happen tomorrow? Do you have no faith? Then some additional information. We're told that they were terrified and asked each other, second question, who is this guy? Now we're getting somewhere. Even the wind and the waves obey him. So where they were afraid of drowning, they are now terrified of what Jesus has just done. Remember, these guys in the boat are Galilean. Why is everyone rubbing themselves? It's cold in here, isn't it? Are you all cold? Okay. Everyone's going to do this. Okay, sorry.
It's the wind and the waves.
The wind and the waves. This is a bit like the marriage bed. All the women are going, it's freezing, and all the guys are going, it's hot in here. These guys in the boat are Galilean Jews. Since childhood, they've been taught that out there on the water is a place of danger, a place of ghosts and monsters and demons. And they have always been taught to believe that the only one who can do what Jesus has just done is God himself. These are men who know the Torah by heart. Since childhood, it's been ingrained into their nautical minds, in the words of the Song of Moses, that by a blast of his nostrils, God makes the waters pile up. By his word, he makes the waves congeal in the heart of the sea. They've just seen Jesus do what they believe only God is able to do. And so now the question of whether or not Jesus cares fades into insignificance as they begin to wonder, who is Jesus? What is he? What might he want? This is the question that makes faith possible. Who is this? Next slide, please. Who is he? Jesus wants to take his followers to a place where they realize that he's not just another teacher. He's God. Not God in the sense of, maybe you should build me a new temple or construct a new religion around my personality, but God in the sense of, maybe you should have a little faith in me. God in the sense of, maybe you might want to consider trusting me with every area of this life that you have to live. So you see, the question of Jesus and who he is and what faith in him is worth is not a question that can be discussed in a vacuum. The whole question of faith and what it does to a man and what sort of a difference it makes in his life, these are questions that must always be discussed in the context of the actual life we live, right? If you've never lived through a storm, you don't know who Jesus is in a storm. If you've never gone through trouble, you don't know who Jesus is in trouble. You don't know who you are in trouble. And so the trouble is not only a place of trouble, it is also, with the right spirit, a place of discovery, a place of improvement. And more importantly, to ask who Jesus is also to ask, is this person God? Is he somehow involved with the construction and the living and the ultimate destiny of my life? And if he is, should I trust him with my life? Should I spend my life in such a way that demonstrates the fact that I believe who he is, that he is who he said he was? When the disciples eventually came to the end of their questions, the things that they had previously believed, they now believed with a new internalization. These are people who eventually went from asking simple questions about does Jesus care to being willing to die for him in a Roman amphitheater. So it seems in this story at least that Jesus uses the storm to bring his disciples to a place where they can realize the value of their faith. Now here's the rub. In the discrepancy between life and faith, in the huge void between what the Bible promises and what we get delivered, there are always going to be questions. And the questions are always going to be of a sort that, well, question who you are and what you believe. And it may be, it is at least worth considering, that the questions that arise out of our darkest depressions and our most numbing fears make us more rounded people with a far firmer grip on faith that we might otherwise have had. Is that not true in life, after all? Is it not true that those who value companionship the most are those who have known what it is to be lonely? Is it not true that those who understand the value of financial security are those who have known what it is to barely get by? Is it not true that those who love happiness and who understand its worth are those who have known the great lows of life? Why should faith be any different? Do not resent the events of life, however unwelcome, that raise the hardest of questions. Those questions will teach you something of who you are and the value of faith. And my prayer for you, and my prayer for myself, in the words of Job, is that when you are done being tested, you will come forth as pure gold. Because that's what you are. At least big soft me. What time is it? I'll check myself because yours are wrong. Oh, gotta go. No questions today. 11:30. Thanks for coming. God bless you. See you next Sunday.